Alright, so I'm waiting for this thing to show up. For whatever reason, I'm having some type of technical difficulty here, so let's figure this out. Let's see why this is not working. Alright, let's see here. Yeah, it's showing it offline. What the heck? Alright, give me a moment, y'all. I want to get through this, but for whatever reason, so yeah, thank you everybody that's joined me once again. Looks like we got the stream back up and running now, so thank you everybody. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and check out the Sound Mind Sessions. That's my free video course that I have on my website right now. So go ahead and check that out. I'll leave a link in the video description once this video is done. But anyhow, today's video, I want to discuss a topic that is regarding the sound, or not so much sound, but more so in the Groovebox domain. A question that I got in my email from a user was asking a kind of what I would call a philosophical question about Grooveboxes, and I'll read the question to you guys. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Hopefully the stream is working good now. If not, I apologize in advance. So the email reads this. Over the years, I seem to have acquired several Grooveboxes / drum machines. All have different pros and cons, and I'm functional on each, some more than others. My problem is that I like them all, but I know in order to be more efficient that I need to stick to just one or two. I currently have a Yamaha RS7000, MPC1000, MV8000, SP808, ASRX Pro, and a SU700. Having a hard time deciding what to let go of and what to keep, or keeping all and integrate into my setup as needed. What would you advise as far as steps to make the best decision possible? All right, so I could definitely relate to this question, because this question has more to do with the philosophy of being a creative artist, and what your take is, or what your relationship is to instruments and their kind of like their importance in the creative process. So the way I would approach this question is more so with respect to attacking the philosophical part first, because I think from a technical standpoint, it gets a little bit more complex. But if you look at it from a philosophical standpoint, I think it'll answer the question better. So realistically, a Groovebox is a type of device that is more of an instrument than anything else, right? So a Groovebox is not necessarily a DAW, or it's not the only thing that you'll have in your music production setup. So to think about a Groovebox as something that you have to become a master at, I think is a philosophical question, because at the end of the day, you can become a master at that as a music producer, but if you're making music that people are consuming, you're not necessarily going to be known for the Groovebox. Not necessarily. It could be the case if you champion that, if you want to be the guy that's championing a certain Groovebox, sure. But at the end of the day, people will remember you more for the music that you create and not so much the equipment that you use. So realistically, you can use whatever Grooveboxes you want. And if you want to have multiple Grooveboxes, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think where it becomes a problem is if you create a box or a limitation on how you need to use these things, and more so how you need to approach creating music. Because a Groovebox doesn't have to be the only place that you start creating music. You can start creating music anywhere with a different instrument, with keyboards, with, your voice, or, with a guitar, or something else. Like, it doesn't have to start with a groove box. A groove box is just one place where creativity can flow from. And I think more so, the choice of starting with a groove box or starting with any instrument has more to do with you knowing the sound and the things that you can get out of the specific tool that you're choosing. Because each of these instruments are also tools when we talk about music production. They're tools to create or shape sound or develop sound. So if you're producing music, you need to know the equipment well enough so that you can develop the sound that you have in your head. It's the thing that is most important, that you know what's possible with the equipment well enough that you can say, I want this piece of gear specifically because this is what I'm trying to do. And in some cases, it may not be that simple. Sometimes you might just want to do something creative with the equipment and see where you go with it or what you can come up with. And that's fine, too. I think there's no problem with having that more free-form approach. But again, you can use any piece of equipment for that. You can use any groove box. So I would say, as long as you're not creating any false limitations on yourself with regards to how creativity comes, then you can have as many groove boxes as you want. I do know that it can become problematic if you try to make a Voltron thing out of all your groove boxes. So say you got like 5 different groove boxes. You have all these groove boxes that my friend said here, and he's like, well, what should I do? Should I try to integrate them? Well, I would say integrate them as needed for the production that you're working on, but don't try to like link them all up and try to make some crazy workflow, because that can be a distraction more so, because there's a lot of technical issues that come up that can prevent you from actually getting stuff done, and you'll be focused more on how these things all work together as opposed to really getting music done. So I would say that's more important, more than anything else, is that you know that you shouldn't be trying to make a Voltron thing out of it, but just use what you need once needed, and you can, put the rest on the shelf. You can put them out of your way so that you're not bothered by all the issues that come up using a groove box, or, using multiple groove boxes for that matter, because when you use multiple groove boxes, you can have synchronization issues, timing issues, all kind of other things that will prevent you from actually getting your idea out. So I would say, if it's a distraction to have all those groove boxes right in front of where you're going to work or going to record or perform or whatever it is, then move some of those out the way. Find a place where you can store those, and use what you need at the given time that you're needing to produce or make music. So I would approach it that way. I wouldn't say that you need to necessarily get rid of anything. I would say that you need to understand the gear well enough to be able to make a conscientious choice about what's necessary. So that's it. I mean, if you're a guitar player, you know what I'm saying? Like, a guitar player could have multiple guitars, and they know the sound of each guitar. It might have specific things that each guitar can do. There may be like certain tone settings or certain tones that they can get out of it, or other features of the guitars that, are appropriate for specific songs and whatnot. And just they may creatively inspire them in different ways. So I would say that, if you were a guitarist, you probably wouldn't have this philosophical issue so much. But I think what happened with groove boxes is that some people have created their full songs off of them. So then there's this whole, mindset that all of a sudden you may have to become a master of a groove box in order to, be some type of, guru producer or whatever it is. But I think there are some champions of different groove boxes and machines, but ultimately you don't necessarily want to be remembered as a champion of a specific instrument unless that's your thing. If that's really important to you, that people know that you use a certain thing, and that's really important to what you're trying to allow people to experience in your music, then fine. Choose the one that you feel like best fits what your workflow is, and most creatively inspires you, and then use that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one you use. I think as far as most consumers are concerned, they don't really care what you make the music on. They just want to hear great music. So whatever you can make great music on, that's what you should be using. And, I recently was watching this documentary, Sound Breaking. If you haven't checked that out, you should check it out. It's a dope, really inspiring documentary that is talking about, different eras of music and different musicians and different things that musicians did to create the most iconic records of, of music and music in general, and of recorded music at least. Very inspiring, and it'll get you thinking about, the way that you approach creativity, because I think there's no limit on creativity. There's just maybe different schools of thoughts, maybe different philosophies on, what people should use and how they should use it, but ultimately, there's no limits or rules to it. It's just, at the end of the day, can you make it sound good? If you can make it sound good, then you should use that. All right? So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me see if I got any questions over here, though, because I think, basically, let's see, we live now, so I should have somebody in here. Let's see who's up in here. Keep in mind. Oh, what's going on, EA Ski? How you doing, bro? Ty Baker. Wouldn't want to part with anything. Yo, I mean, really, I got 4 different Grooveboxes myself. I got a 2000 XL, I got a 4000, and I got 2 of the integrated systems. I got the Renaissance, and I got the machine, the machine setup. So, I mean, each of them inspired me creatively, and I know what to use different ones for at different times. So, it's not really any reason to trip off of it. You know what I mean? But anyhow, let's see. Anybody got any questions? Let's see. Almost thought about selling my MV88 Moog and Motif XF. I wouldn't. As long as you can be creative with it, I wouldn't. I mean, that's the thing. Can you be creative and make good music with it? If you can still, no reason to get rid of it. MPCX or live. Uh-oh. So, I mean, I didn't even talk about what happened with NAMM, but at NAMM, I did get a chance to check out the MPCX and the live. Now, they weren't fully functioning yet, but the thing that I found with them is that they kind of offer some new workflows that weren't accessible on some of the old school MPCs. Like, some of the things that you can do from the screen are a lot more, just fast. Like, you can go through sounds fast, you can access different menus, you can rename samples with the, on-screen QWERTY keyboard, and all kind of cool stuff that you can do on a lot of the old MPCs. But still, I'm not really that convinced on all aspects of either one yet. But right now, if I was going to make a selection, I would say the live makes more sense because it's portable, it's battery powered, I can take it with me, and it pretty much does all the same stuff as far as the software goes, but you may not have as much of the, analog outputs and the CV outs and all that stuff. So I wouldn't trip off of that personally, though, because for the most part, I don't have any gear. I mean, I got a couple pieces of gear that go CV, have CV inputs and whatnot, but for the most part, I don't use that much, so that wouldn't affect my decision making. More so, it would be about the MPC workflow, which you get in both, but I would say the live makes more sense price wise, and as far as what I can get out of it in terms of a standalone unit. For me personally, the whole idea of a standalone MPC in this day and age, I expected that a standalone MPC would have the ability to host VSTs. I found out that these standalone units don't host VSTs, so if you want to use VSTs, you have to connect to the computer anyhow. And to be honest, I've been using VSTs with my MPCs for over 10 years. It's called MIDI, you know what I'm saying? Like, you hook up a MIDI cable from your MPC to the computer, and you can control VSTs. I've done it. I got videos where I'm doing it. So like that whole thing of a standalone MPC, it's not enough for me to make me want to go out and get it personally. I would have to be into more so some of the new functions or features in the software, like maybe the audio tracks or something like that. But then again, for me, audio tracks is not a big deal with the MPC because I don't want to use the MPC as a DAW. Like, it's not a DAW for me. And one of the things that I found that I couldn't even do, it may come later, but right now, when I was trying to work on the MPC X and the Live, I couldn't, there was no way to route a program, the output of a program, to the input of an audio track. So say I had like a drum pattern going on one of my programs in the MPC and I wanted to record that and bounce that down as audio to an audio track. There was no way to route that real time. Now there may be some type of export feature or something internally. Didn't get that far into it, but the way that I intuitively thought you would be able to work with it, you couldn't. So I found that to be kind of an issue because as far as standalone MPCs go, when you start getting into things like key groups and whatnot, key groups can be very problematic when you use a standalone MPC because they take up a lot more of the polyphony. And if you look at the polyphony specifications for the MPC X and the MPC Live, I believe it's like 64 voices. Now, that's the same thing you get on the 4000. And from my experience with the 4000, when you load up a couple of keyboard sounds and you start sequencing or, creating original music, then there's a problem with the polyphony. And you want to be able to bounce that down to audio to get back some of your polyphony or some of your voices. So if you can't do that, then it's a big limitation. And for me, as more of a keyboard player, it's a no-go. It's a deal breaker for me. Let's see what else we got here. With Machine, what's the best recommendation for organizing your drums? I mean, with Machine, it's dope because you don't have to deal with file-based organization. Everything in Machine is more about tagging. So Machine has relative referencing. So what it means is that when you scan a path or a location on your hard drive and you put it into like the Machine user path or the user library, Machine just looks at that as a relative reference inside of its browser. So when you go to the browser now, it's not looking specifically at like a file structure. So your file structure is kind of irrelevant with Machine. It's more about how you tag things. And I would say that you need to find a good tagging system that works for you, that allows you to identify what kind of drum sounds you're looking for. And I would say, just tag it based upon, sound types and what kind of libraries you're using. That's how I would go for it. I've been looking into getting the 2000 XL. Can that work with Logic? Yeah, for sure. I've worked like that for a long time. Like, I pretty much, when I stopped using the motif for keyboards and whatnot, I was using Logic, and I used to connect my MPC 2000 XL as well as the 2500 to Logic. And actually, if you look at some of my very first videos on YouTube, like back in 2008, some of my very first videos were on that specific topic of connecting the MPC to Logic. So it's definitely possible. Been doing it for a very long time. And it works fine. If you want to use the MPC as a sequencer and use Logic as a host for VSTs and whatnot, you can do that and then track the audio from the MPC into Logic and continue arranging, mixing, and all that stuff in Logic. That works fine. And, the template that I have for Machine and for the MPC software actually does that very thing. So if you're going for like more of the virtual MPCs, I would say, check out that template. It's on my site as well. But if you're going for more of a standalone thing, it still works. And I may do another tutorial, updated tutorial on how to do that, so that you can get into it, because it's a good workflow if you just want to work from the MPC as a sequencer. Do you still use the MPC RAN, and does the software crash a lot? So I use the MPC RAN sparsely. I mean, it's not my number one go-to thing. I use Machine a lot more, just personally, because now the Machine offers me a lot of things creatively that I can't get out of the RAN. So, but to answer the question, the last I was using the RAN, it was pretty solid. I think where you can have a lot of issues with any host is working with different VSTs and different plugins, because you may pull up a plugin that has some issue or incompatibility, and that's where a lot of crashes go. But if you're primarily using samples and that kind of thing, you shouldn't have any problem. I think the RAN is pretty solid at this point. I'm using 1.9, and I haven't had any issues with it. So, I would say, just if you're getting crashes, pay attention to what VSTs you're using with the Renaissance, and then, maybe some VSTs you shouldn't use with the Renaissance. And I think that's another reason why that Logic template that I sell is like really good, because it allows you to separate the two. Like, you don't have to host all the instruments inside of the MPC, because sometimes that's where a lot of the instability comes. But when you're using a separate host, that's when you can get a lot of more freedom, because say if your host crashes that has all the instruments, your sequence is still there and you haven't lost your sequence. You just need to open up the host and the instruments again. So I like working that way, and I think that way it's a lot more stable. Let's see here. How do you use your iPad with your setup? A lot of different ways. Sometimes I use the iPad as a sound source. Sometimes I use the iPad as a remote control for my DAW. It depends on what I want to use it for. There's no standard way. So I'm a Logic user primarily, so they have the Logic remote software, which works as like a DAW controller. You can change different patches and presets, and you can change the mix, the faders on the mix, and you can also do things like there's a lot. You can change transport and control the transport and whatnot, and it has some MIDI controller settings as well, so it can act as a MIDI control surface. So that's some of the ways I would use the iPad. And then sometimes I just want to use it as an instrument, because there's some cool stuff on there that I don't have in the in my computer, like Animoog, for example. Like, that's one of the things that is really cool that I don't have. There's no VST for it, but it works really cool as a synthesizer, and I'll hook that up to some inputs on my interface and jam out, and it's a cool instrument. So a lot of times I use the iPad as an instrument, but sometimes as a MIDI controller as well, or sometimes as a external recording device if I want to capture ideas while I'm doing something else on the computer. So there's no one modality of using it. I think the thing about these types of devices, the computer or iPad or phone, they can be anything you want them to be. So I think that's the beauty of it. Like, whenever you want to use it as something else, you can, and you should, really be creatively free enough to just say, I'm just going to use it for whatever I need it for. It's a tool, and, you don't have to use it just one way. Yeah, Con, I did answer your question. You might want to go back later. Sick-made hardware run stuff. I mean, I think it's a good idea to have a mixture of both hardware and software today. I don't think there's one thing that is better than the other. I think if you know what the capabilities are, you can get a lot of use out of each thing, but you should know why you're using each thing. What I do notice though is that a lot of software tries to market itself as hardware replacements, and I think that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. It shouldn't be that everything in the software domain is trying to say that it's an equivalent or like a substitute for the hardware version. I think ultimately, if that were the case, then a lot of the hardware versions wouldn't exist anymore. It just wouldn't be. It wouldn't make any sense. We don't use when a better technology comes, we don't purposely use the lower or the weaker technology or the older technology. When a new technology comes and it's truly better, it's truly more performant, it usually phases out the old stuff, and then only people that are like super nostalgic and are just super resistant to change will use the old stuff, the old technology. And I think with software, I mean, if the software stuff was that much better than hardware, then it would have really just decimated hardware. And I think what has happened, what you are seeing, is that more people are having more access to these software-based technologies. So it looks like, yes, a lot of people are using software, but I think most professionals use a combination of hardware and software. I don't think there's one modality that's better, but ultimately you got to know what you're getting out of it. And if you respect the idea that software is capable of certain sounds, it has, certain abilities like instantiation, and, it can be a bit more performant as well, as far as, how many different things you can run at once. I mean, you get a lot of benefits from that, and then you get recall and things like that you don't get on a lot of hardware. There's things that you get that are advantages, but ultimately know what the sound is, play with different hardware, play with different software, know what you can get out of it. Will Native Instruments follow the standalone train? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think if you look at the history of Native Instruments and what native really means, I think a lot of people don't realize that native means that it's running from a computer. That's what the term native means. It's running from a computer CPU. So Native Instruments is like instruments that run from the computer. That's what that really means. So when somebody says a plugin is native, they're not necessarily talking about native instruments, but they're talking about the fact that it runs from a computer and not from like some type of DSP chip or some other type of system. So, well, Native Instruments, a company that is like basically founded on the idea of being able to create sounds and generate instruments and whatnot from a computer, I don't know. Time will tell. I think if the market demands that, and I think if if all things line up for Native Instruments, maybe. But I couldn't really tell you. From what I can see, it's still very much up in the air because that's not their lane. So let's see. Never share your old gear unless the money will actually improve your sound or speed up, not change your workflow, in my humble opinion. Yeah, I mean, that's a good opinion for sure. Is the machine tagging tutorial on your website? I'm looking to gain more tips and skills using machine. No, it's not on my website. I should make it though, so maybe I'll take some time and show you how to organize your sounds in machine. If you don't find it, let me know. I'll do it, and hopefully that helps. So, is there a way to hook up a mic or guitar into the MPC 2000 XL and record sound directly into it? Absolutely, and I don't know why more people don't do that. The MPCs and hardware samplers kind of got stuck in this modality that you can only sample records and stuff into it, but no, you can sample anything you want. You can sample live drums into it. You know, you got to have the correct setup to do it, but you can definitely, you know, hook up a microphone or whatever else. Like a 2000 XL doesn't have a mic preamp on it, so you need to run a mic preamp into it. That's how you would sample a guitar or, you know, bass or, you know, microphone, drums, whatever. Like that's how you would do it is you get a mic preamp, take the, you know, signal through the mic preamp, go out of the mic preamp into the inputs on the MPC 2000 XL and sample it. And you can get whatever sounds you want. Like, don't get stuck into believing that an MPC or any hardware sampler is just about records, because it's not. It's much more to it than just records. And I think creatively, if a lot more people started trying to sample different things into it, they would find themselves using the MPC a lot differently instead of just, you know, cutting up a sample into 16 pads and then rearranging it. Like, that's one way to use it for sure. And I don't knock it. I just think that it's a limitation or a box that people are putting themselves in creatively that they don't need to. How do you use Logic and each Groovebox to get different creative results? I think for me, there's no one way, right? That's the best way to really answer it. It's no one way. With a Groovebox, I like using Grooveboxes and standalone because it allows me to focus on getting the most out of what I can do with that Groovebox first. And, you know, sometimes I'll just say I want to sample some things and play with some samples and see what they sound like when I start manipulating them and create some sequences and, you know, maybe create a couple of sequences, figure out what sequence sounds best. And then once I get something that sounds cool on the Groovebox, then I record it into Logic or, you know, whatever I want to record it into and further manipulate it there. That's one way to deal with it. You know, sometimes I'll try to do different stuff though. Sometimes I might have something in Logic that I want to sample into the MPC to manipulate that way and come up with something interesting and then fly it back into Logic. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think one of the things that people have to understand is that when you start doing creative stuff, it takes work. You can't be afraid of working. If you're afraid of working, if you're afraid of a process that takes longer to try to get to some type of creative outcome, then, you know, you may miss out on a lot of opportunities. You shouldn't be afraid of exploring. Sometimes your creative exploration may not yield the results that you wanted, and sometimes you may have to just scrap part of that idea, but I think it's worth it to try to experiment and see what you come up with and see if you can, you know, push a sonic boundary or creative boundary with a different process. So I try a lot of different ways, and you know, it's what makes things fun for me. If I did everything on the computer, I would get bored. And if I did everything on just the MPC, I would get bored. But I think the combination of the two allows me to play with different ideas and, you know, figure out what works best. So I would suggest that you know, consider the many different ways that you can work with it. But it ultimately comes down to knowing that you can record audio into an MPC and knowing also that you can record audio into your DAW. And knowing that, you can transfer stuff back and forth. I like recording stuff. I don't necessarily like just popping out a disc or whatever and, you know, transferring it from one digital device to another, because I think that's not as fun to me. I'd rather just, you know, hit play, record it, and then go from there. So that's how I get down. Have you heard and used Studio One 3? Absolutely. I have Studio One 3. Played with it a little bit. It's awesome. It does some really cool stuff. For me, I'm not one to want to hop around DAWs too much because you know, I gotta, for me, the DAW is where my stuff gets finished. That's where the stuff like really materializes into something that I can use in a real application. So for me, like Studio One is great. It offers a lot of stuff, but I can do everything I need to do right now with Logic, so I don't mess with it too much. Like I got a couple of homies that are like super like Studio One champions, and they wear the flag and all that, or wave the flag for Studio One 3, and that's great. I think that they do like awesome work too. But at the end of the day, I mean, as long as you know the software, you can get down. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. Maybe you have to go through a different process with a different software. But I think, again, like I was just saying, creative processes are not necessarily always about being fast. I think quick, like if something is expedient, it can be very helpful when it's about you quickly getting your idea out. But I think sometimes if it's about a trial and error process, if you're doing something that you're just testing to see what you can get out of it, sometimes it could take longer for you to do the test. Sometimes it's worth it though. But ultimately, most stuff that I need to do, I can do in Logic. And, if there's like this one thing that I need to do in a different DAW, then I'll take that one feature and implement it, and that's cool too. There's nothing wrong with taking something out of your main DAW, manipulating it in something else, and then pulling it back into your DAW to keep working. So sometimes I do that as well. How do you feel about the chord scale mode on Machine? A lot of trained musicians, pianists, and keyboardists hate on cats that use this feature. They can be helpful. I think that, it's a lot of philosophical stuff that stops musicians. Like, it's not really a lot of technical stuff. Like, it's a lot of philosophical stuff that stops musicians from really exploring creative possibilities. So, like, yeah, it's a scale mode. It's designed to help you to quickly access a scale or, chords and whatnot. It's a creative tool. It can be a creative crutch if you don't devise, or like if you don't plan to learn why that stuff works. If you don't want to know about how chords and scales work, it can be a creative crutch, but it doesn't have to be. It can also give you some new creative possibilities, because just being able to trigger the chords in a rhythmic fashion from pads may give you a different sonic result than you would get on the keyboard. And a lot of times, people got to get out of this like one mode of input into a computer or into a system. Because for me, a keyboard gives me one specific type of feel, and I have certain habits and ways about how I use the keyboard when I get in front of a keyboard. But it's a lot different from when I get in front of pads and I start doing things on pads. So sometimes I'll play melodies on pads just to get a different feel or get some different creative results. And sometimes I play it on keys. Just depends on what I need, or depends on, what's inspiring at the time. But I think it's nothing wrong with the chord and scale mode. For some people, it may help them to learn chords and scales, because, on some of these devices now, like the Complete Control and stuff, it's lighting up the keys in the scale and lighting up the keys in the chord. So you may eventually learn some music. I wouldn't trip off of what a classical pianist does, because I think they're so, philosophically in bed with the idea of learning music theory and learning that specific mode of playing, that you can't really tell them anything else. And, it's fine. Like, they may feel like it's cheating. They may feel like it's something that you shouldn't do. But ultimately, I think there's no limit to creativity. I think that we as musicians can limit ourselves just based upon our philosophical stance towards certain things. And I think you don't have to do that. You can be more creatively free and just explore and see what gives you the results, and use whatever gives you the best results for, your idea. Will a new studio controller be released within the next year? All right, y'all got to stop asking me about Native Instruments stuff. This is not Native Instruments website, okay? Like, I answer some questions if it's like more product specific, as far as like how a product works or whatever. But as far as somebody's release schedule, it's Ultra West, and my site is ultrawest.com. That's what we take care of here. You know what I'm saying? Like what they do, what Native Instruments does, that's them, that's their business. When they release stuff, I'll let them, handle their release schedule. I don't handle their release schedule. So that's how I'm gonna answer that question. That's not a yes or no. That's their business. My business is ultrawest.com. So hopefully that ain't offending you. That's just keeping it real. I can't really talk about their business. I can talk about my business, and I can kind of help y'all if you need help with using certain products. Yeah, again, I'm not answering anything related to Native Instruments releases or updates to software. That's their business. But I agree that time stretch will help a ton of people that use Machine. I think real-time time stretch is a important feature to have in a sampler now. So hopefully it does come soon. But I have no clue how soon it's going to come, and that's the honest truth. For me though, like I've never been like a big time stretch guy, so I know time stretch will give me some new creative options in terms of how I can manipulate samples, but it's not something that I highly rely on at all, because I think not having time stretch also gives you different creative outcomes. So that's how I approach that, and I'm cool with it for the most part. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If y'all don't have any more questions, I just want to tell you I appreciate y'all. Again, if you haven't already checked out the Sound Mind sessions, go ahead and sign up for that on my website. It's my 6-part video course for music producers. Check it out. It's free. It's absolutely free. Just go ahead and sign up. And I'll also put a link in the video description once this stream is over so that you can click on that, but it's also on my website ultrawest.com, so check that out. Yeah, I knew y'all wasn't gonna let me go away that soon, but let me answer I'm gonna answer 2 more questions and then we out. How many Grooveboxes do I own? I own 4 technically. So I have the 4000, the MPC 4000. I have the 2000 XL. I have Machine, and I have the MPC Renaissance. Now, if you ask me which one is my favorite one, I would say overall at this point, Machine is probably my favorite one because I can do the most stuff in it. Like, it's a drum synthesizer. Like, you can create drum sounds in it, like from scratch. Crazy. Like, none of my other drum machines do that. The key mapping or the key group style sampling in Machine is really awesome to me. Like being able to sample different sources and turn them into keyboard instruments. Love that feature. That's probably one of my favorite features. It's a feature that none of the other MPCs except for the 4000 and of course the software has it now. But even the software on the MPC doesn't really compete with Machine as far as the key groups go for me. So I like Machines, the way it handles it better, because things like portamento and legato play modes and things like that, if I want to create synthesized sounds and or synthesized sample-based sounds inside Machine, it's a lot easier for me. And I like a lot of the effects that Machine comes with as well. I think that the arranger, once you understand how to use it, you can really come up with stuff quickly. And I feel like it took me out of a specific style of programming in the MPC where, everything is track based in the MPC. And that kind of created a certain workflow and certain habits for me. And Machine allows me to break out of some of those habits and go at different ways of approaching the arrangement. So that is my favorite out of all of them. But if we want to talk about just standalone stuff, without question, the MPC 4000 is my favorite standalone hardware Groovebox. It's like top notch, I think, as far as the abilities on it being able to do key group style sampling, phrase sampling. The sequencer on it is very flexible. It has up to 960 parts per quarter note, so it's like really almost like DAW style recording resolution, but you can scale it back down to 96 like the old school sequencers and whatnot, and get that feel. And just some of the other features, like it does 96K 2496, and I don't even think the MPC X and the MPC Live are going to do 2496. From what I heard, it sounds like 2444.1. So again, the 4000 does 2496. Just a lot of cool stuff in there. I mean, it's a beast, and I think it's one of the best hardware sequencers that has ever been created. Last question here. Could a standalone audio interface with mic pre's be connected to the MPC 2000 XL? What kind of connections would I need to connect those two things? There are some standalone audio interfaces that are kind of like digital mixers. That's how I would describe them. Like the Motu 828, for example, is more like a digital mixer. It can work as an interface for your computer, but you can also just use it as standalone without it being connected to the computer, because it has this like QMix software, and you can route things in and out of it, and that can be used to connect to like an MPC or something like that. I think the easiest way is to just use a mixer though. If you don't have preamp and all that stuff, I think ideally you would use good preamps. Like that, there's no reason to not have good preamps in this day and age. You can get some really good stuff. You got the 500 series stuff. You also got companies like Warm Audio. If you're not familiar with Warm Audio, you need to get familiar with them, because they got a lot of nice outboard hardware, EQs, compressors, preamps, and whatnot. And they're like, everything is like under $1,000, and it sounds really good. It's all analog stuff based upon like things like the 1176 compressors and Pultec EQs and API style preamps. Like, you can get access to all that now. Like, check out Warm Audio. And I actually got some stuff coming. I got some EQs and stuff coming, and I'll do some tutorials and whatnot about what you can do with some of that stuff, probably in a later session. But I would say, at minimum, have a mixer at least, so that you can go from a mixer into your MPC. But if you don't have a mixer, you need to look at the standalone audio interfaces that are available on the market and see if one makes sense to you. Like I just named one, the Motu 828 series. Those are digital mixers that you can use in standalone, and they have preamps and stuff. I wouldn't say the preamps are like excellent. They're like not super colored or anything like that. They're kind of like very standard preamps, nothing special about them, but you can use them if you want to use that as an interface or a preamp to sample into your MPC. But I would say either get a real preamp, like you can get a 500 series. You can check out the Warm Audio Tone Beast. There's other options out there like API, Lunchbox, all kind of stuff you can use to use as a preamp now. So no excuse for not having a preamp at this point. Just invest the money. I would say if you can invest in a good preamp, that will give you a lot of options as far as recording and capturing sound inside your sampler. So that's it, y'all. Thank you for joining me once again. I don't know, we're almost about 50 minutes into it now. I don't want to take up too much of y'all time. I didn't watch the Super Bowl. That's not really my thing. I was in here, figuring stuff out myself, trying to get things going in the lab. So, I just wanted to chop it up a little bit, and maybe some of y'all felt the same way. Some of y'all wasn't watching the Super Bowl, and I applaud that. If y'all, you serious about your craft, sometimes the Super Bowl is not that important, but if you did, it's all good. If you watch the Super Bowl and you want to check this out later, it's all good too. But I appreciate y'all. Once again, like I said, go check out my 6-part video course on my website. It's free. It'll teach you a lot about music production, like a lot of things that are not commonly taught about music production, the things that you really need to know to get ahead. I'm giving that away as a free course on my website. You just need to sign up for it. I'll leave a link in the video description, or you can also go to ultrawest.com. So that's it. Until next time, I want to tell y'all peace and God bless.